this short series is If You Build It.
Oh, if you build it, they will come. I'm going to have to say it now.
No, that's right.
Yeah. Hey, look, put it in there, you know. I will, and you can use it in the beginning of your trailer.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of If You Build It, presented by Get Home Safe. One day I'm just going to have the whole Get Home Safe just fall down. Get Home Safe.
Yes.
And we're here with my friend Jazz. She's the founder of Saving Space.
Saving Space.
And she's black, she's beautiful, and that's my friend. All right, so tell us about your journey as a yogi.
Mm-hmm. I'll definitely take that on.
Mm-hmm.
My journey, that it's a loaded question, but that's what we're here for.
Yes.
And so I feel like with my the beginning of my journey with yoga had to be my sophomore year undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
My older sister, shout out to Jasmine,
Mm-hmm.
older sisters, you know, they help you navigate through the world.
Which school is this at?
George Mason University.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out, you know, GMU what. And she took me to this hot yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
And it was specifically, you know, a vinyasa flow, 60 minutes of just sweat. And I felt like this purification and this detox that I never knew I needed. And it was this inkling that I had that I always kept coming back to it. And it was when I stopped competing collegiately for George Mason
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to, you know, explore my body outside of competition in a way where I felt like it was challenging. And so my true journey with yoga and the lifestyle of it started maybe about, what year is this again? My context.
2021.
Look, 2021.
Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah, my time of concept is kind of skewed, but it's really been about 12 years now
Mm-hmm.
that I have practiced continuously and developed myself to, you know, found myself as an instructor of yoga.
What are your feelings on wellness?
Wellness is such a umbrella, right?
Mm-hmm.
But essentially it is tools, resources to allow you to be your absolute best self. And so you can do that in multiple ways in the way that you approach it. The way that I specifically approach it is through a holistic way and using mindfulness as a tool.
Okay. Let's speak on tools. I think that's very important, especially when it comes to the word mindfulness. How do you define mindfulness?
Mindfulness as the practice is the integration of being able to take a moment to pause, right? To be present within this time frame that we have. You know, sometimes we're stuck and we are bound by the past and we worry and we stress about the future, but the true reality is all we have is this moment, right? And for us to be present minded, right, is to be mindful, right? And so whether that means as you take a time to brush your teeth to really feel, right, if you have a manual or automatic, right, to feel that bristle going over each and every tongue, you know, tooth. Or if you're eating your favorite sweet, right, how can you savor that moment? How can you be mindful? Or when you're with your friends and your family, being able to just, you know, maybe low tech, high engagement, where you are in this moment and you're actively listening. Or it can always be as simple as finding your breath, right, in a chaotic moment, or just to feel grounded, you know?
Yeah. So in your journey of mindfulness, especially when it comes to yoga, how has the black community played a part in that growth?
Yeah, great question. So I think the intersectionality of my identities being a black woman and being able to navigate the space of yoga, right, and yoga studios, right. When I think of yoga, first and foremost, it is the lifestyle practice, right? So what it looks like off of the mat. There are, you know, 8 limbs of yoga. One of those limbs is asana. So it's the physical practice that, like, we talk about, you know, in our everyday life of like, oh, I'm about to go to yoga, right? It's like I'm about to do an asana practice. And so I found myself being sometimes a little chocolate and a sprinkle of seeds of white, people, for the most part, or people that didn't look like me. And so that was something that I was aware of, but because I was doing my asana practice, I was just focusing on me, right? And one thing that kind of birthed my wellness brand, Saving Space, was this opportunity of like running late to a class, right? And let's say it's 5:30, rush hour class, just getting off of work, and you're running a little bit late. How would your practice begin, or how would you feel as soon as you got there? Your instructor already had a spot laid out for you, already saved space for you. And that mindfulness, right, that intentionality of knowing who is in the room and who's not in the room, whether that be physically, or it could even be based within identities as well. And so that was something that was huge for me, in being able to identify and acknowledge who are in the room and who's not in it based off of identities. And then I feel like with yoga, and this idea around it, when you think of a yoga instructor, or you think of someone practicing an asana, you think of a skinny white woman wearing Lululemon, right?
Yeah.
And that is like a norm that we have to kind of break. And the reality is that yoga, the lifestyle, is a part of a culture, right? That is like rich in history, in meaning, in language. And so as a Black woman, right, a Black cis gender woman, right, like it was really important for me to show up in a space where I could find myself in that, but also honor where yoga came from as well.
Okay. Speaking of honor, your journey as a yogi and how you lead, can you speak on that process?
Yeah, so how I lead, something that's really important to me is that foundationally that we are all, students and teachers of life.
Yeah.
And so what that means and what that looks like to me is that as I show up as a leader, I honor each and every experience that I've had off of the mat and the lessons that I've also learned on the mat. Yeah. And I share that with my students and I share that with my clients. And I feel like that also gives me this openness to also learn from my surroundings, to learn from my students, how the way that I might, my intentions and my impact are very different things. And so being able to give even just feedback sometimes is really helpful as I lead, and as I grow as a yogi. And when it specifically comes to saving space, it allows me to be able to see it on a more global, on those macro levels, and what we can do as a vessel to acknowledge the need for collective healing, right? Especially as we're going through this global pandemic, right? And the way that we deal with trauma individually and the way that we deal with trauma collectively.
What does collective healing look like for your community?
Ooh, collective healing looks like being able to give people, again, the tools, the resources to show up as themselves, right? And to give them the skills to even be able to identify some of the hurt. I think it's really important for us to know that hurt can show up in multiple ways in our actions and in our reflections and all of those, nuances of life. And so if we're able to give people an opportunity to reconnect with themselves and to sit with their pain in a very safe way, that they can be able to heal themselves and therefore collectively heal our community, right? The work that I do on myself is not just for myself so that I can be my absolute best version. It is me healing myself for the greater whole, so that this identity, right? Or that, what's the there is this saying that hurt people hurt people. Yeah. And it's like, why is that okay? And so what I might ask you, right, is what happens if we're healed? Yeah. What do healed people do? And if I'm able to be healed, and not saying being healed is perfect, right? Because none of us are. I think that it gives us the liberty, right, and the liberation, to allow people to do the same thing for themselves.
Why do you think hurt people has been normalized versus how healed people deal with life.
Yeah, because I mean, just our society is, we love to focus on the negative, right? We love to compare, and it's become embedded in our framework, right? And that hurt people. It gives us this like scapegoat. It gives us this green light for us to unload on our friends that might not will be in a space to take on, as simple as a conversation. It might be, an outlash, right, of the Starbucks person, right? All of those things. This is not, also just a side note, okay, those aren't plugs for anybody. Just giving you examples to make connections with your everyday life. I personally am a tea drinker, so just want to go on record saying that. But it's so easy. It's easy to say someone hurt me, and to make myself feel better, right? The ego is, I'm going to hurt somebody else. I'm going to take this pain and give it to someone else, versus sitting with that pain and seeing how it shaped you and what lessons you can learn from that to allow that hurt to then become healed. And so that we can kind of break those trauma bonds that we have, and even the narrations that we tell ourselves around it.
Can you explain what your practice involves when it comes to helping others?
Yeah, specifically what it looks like is always asking questions. And so that could be, let's say if it's a one-on-one session, it's going to be a lot more intimate, asking you, what have you been feeling in your body? What has been coming up for you emotionally? But the reality is that I'm solely a guide, right? And everything that I'm giving you is simply a suggestion. And so I'm giving you, as the student, as the client, the ability to find your own power, to tap into your own abundance, to be able to say, like, okay, this is the story that I keep telling myself, right? And it's okay to rewrite it. And it's okay to say that this was, at one point you might have been a shitty person, right? And it's okay to say, like, you're not that person anymore. And as you grow with life, because it's inevitable, right? If you're not growing, you're dying is one of my favorite quotes. And so we are constantly evolving. And so how can we do that gracefully?
Okay. How has the study of yoga impacted your life?
Oh my God, in everyday interaction. I think first and foremost, it's really with birth saving space, and wanting to provide a service to the need that I saw within the world. So it gave me my voice, and it allowed me to be a vessel to flow under something that I was truly passionate about. And then just in general, right, how has it impacted? It's in my relationships. I feel that I'm able to love deeper. I feel like because I'm able to love deeper, I'm quick to forgive. I'm also, strong in my boundaries. So it's strengthened me in ways that, like, I needed improving. And it's also allowed me to be extremely real with myself and kind to myself.
Let's speak on self-kindness. That's things that I think I hear people, myself included, we preach kindness. We preach being kind to ourselves. We preach self-care. We preach example of. But what does it mean to be kind to yourself? Okay,
so I hear a lot of what you're saying is, right, about kindness and about maybe the idea around self-care, right? So like those two, they're like sisters, right? Self-care, first and foremost, foundationally for me, is discipline, right? Like who you are and where you're at in the space in between is how you are self-loving yourself, self-caring for yourself, and being kind to yourself, right? And so it's really making that connection to the present for your future self. But when it means to be kind to yourself, right, I try to remind myself that the voice that I hear, right, because that's who I spend most of my time with, right, is like that I'm speaking to it in a voice of love, right? And so if, let's say, for example, something simple as a to-do list. Y'all, my to-do list are crazy. I have all over my space, you'll see these extra, okay, not even like the little sticky notes. the extra large ones that have to-do lists on them, or things that I have to do. And I put exclamation marks by, like, okay, this is a priority, this I can get to, and you know, if I have a little bit of time, I can get to this, right? So how I prioritize. But let's say, for example, I wake up that morning with a to-do list that's full, but what I'm feeling like might be fatigue, right? And so instead of saying like pushing through that shit, or saying like, oh my God, I can't believe you can't do this, right? That negative self-talk, I've just eliminated it. And how I've eliminated self-talk is by identifying, not just within myself, but like within everybody that's in my life as well. Like, not even just in my life, like people that cross paths with me, you know, being kind to yourself, right? If you're always in a state of apology, right? Saying sorry. Even for myself, I said, what are you sorry for?
Yeah.
When people are like apologizing for what? For taking up space? Why? You're worthy, you know? For, you know, expressing your needs? Why? You should be able to do those things, you know? And I think to be kind to yourself, if you can be kind to yourself, right? Imagine how you would treat someone else.
Okay.
You know?
So, treatment.
I got triggered a little bit because I went back to my D1 days and I was like, oh my God, ultrasound, IC, any treatment.
You have an extensive background, not just in yoga, but other things. So let's speak on those backgrounds and how those tie into yoga.
Absolutely. So I went to undergrad for life science, and that was pre-physical therapy. And so I had a insane love for anatomy, an insane love for science. And so that shows up in my practice and it shows up in my teaching. And so whether that means all of the classes that I have, all of my asana classes, there is no level, there's no rank of experience, right? They're all foundational. And so what it means for me is to be able to give people tools again, right? To be able to identify their body, right? And so when I'm talking about feeling rooted, I might say something as like, you know, for common language, we tailbone. But I'll also say sacrum, right? So that you know that the tip of your sacrum is your coccyx, right? That little triangle bone that allows you to feel super connected. Or when we're talking about opening up our heart, we do a lot of work with our thoracic, right? And so that is a position or a part of your, you know, your spine. And so that is really huge for me, and it allows me to have the experience from like a healthcare aspect as well. So one of the places, you know, I'm a firm believer that every job that you've had prepares you for the next one, right?
Yes.
And so I worked for Georgetown University Hospital for several years in their physical medicine and rehabilitation center. And so a wide range in all walks of life in rehabilitation, whether that be outpatient or inpatient. And the mantra at MedStar Georgetown University was Cura Personalis, and it was caring for the whole person. And so that mantra stays with me. So yeah, you know, some people might be coming to my my classes, my asana classes, specifically for that workout, right? And some people might be coming specifically to get connected with my meditation, right? But in reality is that I'm here for the entire person, right? And so that could be me telling you like, hey, maybe you need to give up that water because, you know, it's alkaline, but how is it made alkaline? You know, what's alkalinity from? Is it man-made? Is it natural? Or if we're talking about food, being able to say like, what are some ways that you can treat your body and care for your body holistically? And so that's why like the holistic approach is really important to me as well. I wear the hat as a middle school educator, which is a very specific time in everyone's life. If you could just take a moment, dear friends, and think about your middle school self. How that is such a pivotal time. And I tell people, right, who you are in your middle school years is essentially who you are in your 20s, okay? It's, you know, of course we learn a little bit more and we express it a little bit different, but the root of you is that, you know, we're a kid that listened to punk rock music, okay? Or whatever your, you know, fetish was at that time. And so you're still unsure of yourself, you're still comparing yourself maybe, and you haven't really found your voice. And so as a middle school educator, I've been able to communicate to people and teach them things, all types of learners, right? And so whether that means you're an auditory learner, right, or a visual learner, or a kinesthetic learner.
What's a kinesthetic?
Movement.
Okay.
So you not only have to teach, touch things, but you also have to do some movement with it. And so one of my favorite labs to do when we're talking about the circulatory and the respiratory system is we go outside and we have this one kid who's going crazy on a drum, right, who's our heart, and we have our students walking through these different blood vessels, right? And so for our kinesthetic learners, they're like, oh my God, when I was in the artery, right, I was having this type of high levels of carbon dioxide or low levels of carbon dioxide. It allows you to have more of a connection to it, especially because we're social beings. And so if I can tap into whatever type of learner you are and then throw the fact in that it's a social experience, you're that much more to have that as a memory, to store that, and to be able to recall those moments.
And this also defines how you approach people when it comes to you as a yoga teacher too.
Yes.
Because they're different personalities and every approach is going to be different.
Exactly. And so I feel like it's a gift, the things that I've learned as a teacher, because I talk to people like they're human, right? And so what that means is, for babies and kids, that's huge, right? Because they are, and not even babies and, adolescents, it's also our elderly too, that really struggle with this, the ideology of their autonomy, right? And so if you're able to see the people and treat them as if they're human, to see their humanity, right, they're that much more open, right? And if, let's say, you're, somebody who might be full of ego, right, and DC, favorite question is, what do you do, right? What do you do? And what can you do for me, right? That's a veil that we hide behind, right? And so I feel like I'm able to kind of break that down and allow people to, be open and honest with me more than they would, in general. As even in my life, in my journey, right? That's why I truly believe that everybody in general, but like where I'm at, exactly where I'm supposed to be, is because I have such a heart for people. And when I ask you, dear friends, how are you? I truly mean it, right? And when people say fine, I have to unpack and say, like, fine's not an emotion, like, how are you? Exactly, it's a state of being. And so there are times where I don't ask people how they are because I don't have the space to hold space for that for them. But I might say, how are things on your end, right? And so even those little nuances, again, are the lessons that I've learned through my lifestyle practice of yoga, right? Of my intentionality of my words and the things that I say.
Can we talk about words mean something? So
you don't know my life.
You and I used to have this moment where I would call you and be like, hey, how have you been? And you used to say, hey, that's loaded.
It's loaded.
And for the first 2 times, it really flew over my head. And I think the third time I caught it and I was like, oh, it is loaded.
It's loaded. It's a loaded question.
Yeah, because I'm not only asking how you have been, I'm asking you to go back to the pain and the joy.
What have you been working through? Is what I hear when you say, how have you been? Like, oh, you ready? You want to sit down and unpack that with me? You know, exactly.
And what if that's not your day to have that conversation?
Right, and maybe you're not qualified, not you, but somebody who's asking that question. I see that so much, right? How I've even adjusted in this like re-entry back into the pandemic world, post mid-panty world that we find ourselves, right? It's such a funny thing that we find ourselves in, right? But like, I'm at a counter and someone's asking me how I'm doing. It's like, dear friend, we just got out of a global pandemic. Are you truly asking me how I'm doing? Or have you automatically gotten back into that autopilot sense of this is how I'm supposed to interact with people, right? And so I check them not even asking any questions or saying it's loaded. I say I've been doing my best, right? And then they're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, right? Oh shit. Because it's like, to ask somebody, it's just like, do you want to, like, you know, leave behind your cash register and, like, you know, have a drink with me real quick and we could talk about it? It's like, if not, you know, like, just being present within that moment, right? And I know that's like, and I'm not saying anything about like service people, right? But just
that's
in
just
our
an example.
Just an example, right? Yeah. I think
we're taught to move along and not really be in.
That those are our social constructs, our social norms, you know, this identity or this ideology of capitalism, right? Which is another way of white supremacy. Okay. Just want to be on the same page with everybody, right? This moment, right, where we couldn't even pause, right, but we have to produce, right? And so you have to, again, right, even in your mindfulness, understand in the ways that you flow. But it's like being able to even understand how our social constructs, right, play a role in us, influence us, right? And so being able to kind of identify within yourself, how can you start to unlearn those nuances that we find ourselves in, right? To, right, be able to produce in the midst of, you know, the chaoticness that we find ourselves, the chaos that we find ourselves in, right? At times. And so I think that's even a great example of how you can be kind to yourself, right? Like, whether that means, you know, you need a mental day, right? A mental health day. Take it. We are under capitalism and they will find somebody else, right, to replace you in that moment, and they'll be okay. I promise you, right? And so you have to do what's absolute best for you. And to, like, get back on, like, one way that science, like, even helps navigate through my life, like, the first law of nature is self-preservation, right? And so I abide by that every single day. And so I have to do the absolute best that I can to preserve myself, right? And so do you.
So, saving space. How do you save space in chaos?
How I save space in chaos is pausing, right? And so knowing, although it might be chaotic, is it my responsibility to care about? And then if it is my responsibility to care about, then I find where my power lies within that to be able to control situations that I can control. And so within saving space, the asana aspect of it, the meditation educational program, or even the sustainability aspect of it, in all of those realms, it's giving people, myself, the tools that we need to create, right? I imagine that, like, everything is flooding in, right? That it's, whether it's a news feed, right? Whether it's calls, whether it's your thoughts, right? Taking a moment to save space. And I personally do that with my breath. That, like, when I practice my meditation, you know, sometimes you can do guided meditations where you hear people, you know, help you navigate through that. But for me, I like to sit in silence. And because what happens is that as I'm sitting in silence, I'm anchored in my breath, right? I notice my breath, whether it's extending it, right, for a certain period of time, or as my thoughts are happening. I love to use the visualization of staring at the sky, right? As you are sitting there, right? Everyone's always like, oh, I'm gonna be bad at meditating. I'm the worst at it. And it's like, no, dude, you just show up. You show up as you are, you pause, and you get anchored into your breath. And as you are looking up to that sky, right, what go by? Clouds, right? And as you're sitting there meditating, thoughts are gonna go by, right? Whether you're doing this right, or did you leave your curling iron on, or did I ever respond back to that text message, or oh my God, are they ghosting me? Like, all of those odd thoughts that come to your mind when you stop, right? The beautiful thing about saving space is becoming a witness to that, right? And not being controlled, but allowing those thoughts and those clouds to go by, and not like follow them down into a deep hole where you start to spiral out and, you know, create realities that don't exist.
So you have an extensive background of traveling. And
I be, you know what I'm saying?
I mean,
I go a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
you know,
whatever.
here and
Yeah,
there.
I mean,
I see you.
I
I
be
see
there.
you. You was
I'm
outside.
good on every Martin Luther King Boulevard, okay? I'm good on every MLK Boulevard. Know that.
So, in your travels, have you seen different forms of saving space, or have you thought, if only they were able to save space here?
Absolutely. So, and I'll say this, in Belize, they do such a beautiful, it's a beautiful practice how they save space for our animals in this world. You know, I don't believe that there's any beauty in captivity. And so, like, you know, in the States, we have all these zoos that are, you know, people sometimes pay to go to, and, you know, want to stare at animals in their non-natural habitat, right? And so Belize specifically has a rehabilitation where they have these facilities for animals that have been, you know, harmed or, you know, are trying to repopulate. And so I think Belize does a beautiful job of that, and it's like should be a staple that we all, how we care for animals and how we have our interaction with the world. Hong Kong in general, how they save space for their elderly is always really beautiful to me. I think what they do and how they care for their elderly is something that we should honor, you know, in the States as well, and not necessarily, you know, we have this very odd relationship with growing old. And so because we have this odd relationship, we're not being able to deal with the reality that, you know, at some point we will no longer, you know, cease to exist, right? And to sit with the idea that the people that you love at some point will leave you, it pushes our elderly, right? In even the way that we treat our elderly and the way that we learn about what it means to be geriatric, right? We push that away. And so I wish that that was something that we save space for. And then in Japan, man, they save space for expression, right? I love the way that fashion, in my mind, starts in Japan. Like, trends, like, you know, it starts everywhere, but like the way that they market it and the way that they push it in Japan is on a whole other level. And so the way that they save space for people to show up as they are is so mind-blowing, because what I see, even, you know, sometimes in my city and in my communities locally and abroad, is that we put people in such a box, and anybody who finds themselves outside that box, we kind of ostracize them and cast them away, versus, you know, being able to say, like, dude, that's you, and I might not do that, but like, I love that on you. And to be able to realize that, like, the way someone expresses themselves has absolutely nothing to do with you, you know, is another thing, another way that or another lesson, more specifically, that I've learned throughout my yoga practice.
When you look to building on your practice, what resources do you tap into?
Oof. Life. Really, I tap into that. I tap into teachers and people that I admire. I tap into books that I've read. I'm an avid reader, and constantly, you know, finding new information that I can trust and then I verify, and also the science behind it. I think that, you know, in general, there's not a lot of research on our brain, you know, and our brain is like, our brain is who we are, you know. If we can understand that, like, we are a physical being having a spiritual, you're gonna have to edit this out because I said it the wrong way, but whatever. We are a spiritual being having a physical experience, right? And our brain is the organ that, like, holds all of that. And it holds our memories, it holds our favorite food, or our skills that we identify with, all of those things. And there's like so much information that we have on our brain. And so even that is super exciting to me.
How have you grown in reflection?
Oh. How have I grown in reflection? I think the relationship that I have with anybody that I come across, you know, because I've been able to sit with some of the pain that I've experienced in my life and find peace with it, I'm able to see the pain on others a little bit more easier and be able to be mature about certain things and, you know, not take everything personal. I think that, you know, I've experienced, you know, loss and death a lot within my walk of life. And I think that one thing that I've grown because of that is when I am around somebody or spending time with someone that I love or enjoying something, I'm that much more, you know, in that moment, and I savor it. I live a little bit more, you know, present. You know, it's a funny word to keep using, but it's like I'm here. You know, I try to just be in this moment and not to think about it so much, to be stressed about things that have happened, things that should have happened or didn't happen, or, you know, or things that are going to happen, because the only reality that we truly have is this moment. Everything else it doesn't exist, you know? And I was reading even this idea of our future self, right? The things that we're doing now to come back to even self-love and discipline, right? Your future self, right, is looking back at our present moment through our memories, you know? And so what can I do now in my present self, right? How can I honor myself in this moment in the best way possible so that I can be my absolute best future self?
Okay.
That was real trippy.
No, I don't think that was trippy at all. I
Okay,
actually
cool.
understood that right
Thank
off the
you.
bat.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Where can they find you?
Y'all can find me at... No, I'm joking. No, I don't know. Everyone throws it up too, and I never know. But anywho, you can... You can find me on social media for sure, okay? I am a part of the 21st century. Swami Jazz is my specific wellness brand that's about me. Saving Space for You is Save Space Instagram. These are all of our handles. And you'll be able to have a little bit more information, resources that will be provided if, let's say, for example, you would like to join one of my classes, specifically the Get Home Safe audience. I will add a code in as Get Home Safe so that you can receive $10 off any of my classes. So you can join, you know what I'm saying? You got it. That's the family love. That's the family discount. You feel me? So look, y'all, you know, it's powerful to be connected to Get Home Safe, and it's such an honor, right? And so you can find all of my services, and there I have everything lined out, and you can also go to savingspace.org for more information.
Okay. So to wrap this up, now that you've let everybody know where they can find you, tell me about your spiritual journey when it comes to yoga.
My spiritual journey.
Was there a spiritual journey?
It is a spiritual journey, you know, because the more information that I get, above everything else, I have two really major, you know, things that I strive for. The first one is to always be in tune with the infinite. And so to do that, I have to, you know, die. My flesh has to die. And so what that means is that, like, the things in me that might not be the absolute best have to decrease for me to be used as a vessel. And that, like, as a vessel, right, that I have to also, the way that I move and navigate through life, right, like, there is no, you know, taking off my tie, taking off my dress, right, like, I'm always a yoga instructor. I'm always a a guide for meditation, and I'm always a wellness health advocate. And so that's just who I show up. And so my spirituality is connected and rooted in that, because we're all spiritual beings. And so, like, you'll see me doing, my rituals. I pray every morning. I pray in the Holy Spirit every morning. I do rituals with my tea, right? I love my herbs and being connected with my ancestors. I'm constantly calling on them. At times I use crystals when I feel like it's necessary. But, spirituality is just the way that our spirit, right, is navigating. So at times I just, like I said, I'm in tune with the infinite, and then I allow my spirit to kind of run free, like, lead me, So, yeah.
That was beautiful. I love how, like, right when you said ancestors, the bird went off, and I was like, oh, word?
Yeah, when I tell you, especially in this specific time, man, that's why I was so excited to sit down with Get Home Safe and Dwight, because I feel so in tune, with people, with organisms. I was telling my friend that, like, I felt like I could put my hand out and a bird would land on it. Like, that's how in tune I felt. I know that sounds, whatever it sounds like.
You've made space for the bird.
Yeah, I've made space for the birds.
Yeah.
I'll be walking or laying down in grass and bees are around me. Like, it's a funny thing. And even, it's also a gift. This is a random thought. I'm random at times too, dear friends, and I'll share that with you a little bit more if you join me on this journey. But my mom told me at one point, she was like, Jasmine, that's my name that was given to me, right? She's like, I would have never known that if I would have named you after a flower, how much you would have been such a flower child, turned out to be. And I was like, you knew what you knew in your heart what you were putting on me, to be connected. So yeah, shout out to Trina and Dawn, my creators on this world.
All right, if there's one thing that you would want people to take away from this interview when it comes to saving space, what would that be?
That you are powerful beyond measure, that it's your breath that'll keep you rooted, and that saving space is a place for you when you feel like there aren't any.
That was beautiful.
I just came up with that.
This
is me being a vessel. This is me being a vessel,
All right, well, thank you for coming. I appreciate your time, and thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Dwight. I love you. Get Home Safe. I'm so thankful to have such a beautiful organization within our community because there's such a need for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. If you build it,
they will come.
Y'all better come.
All right, see you guys later.